What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Perhaps. And we're at the end of Lent, people. I'm in all black again, like I have every week. I had to go all out for the vibes, you know? The black nail polish on my nails is mostly gone away, fallen off, chipped off. I didn't do that good of a job, but I feel like it's poetic, like to leave it like slowly chipping away until the end of Lent here. And this Sunday, I'm putting this out on Friday, April 11th, but this upcoming Sunday is Palm Sunday. And then after Palm Sunday, and this is the church liturgical calendar stuff. If you don't know any of this churchy stuff and you just follow me because you just like how I talk about spirituality and politics and culture in general, don't worry. I'm not expecting any of you to have this deep knowledge on any of this religious stuff. But this episode, we're gonna get pretty dang theological, historical, and very, very Jesus-y. But if you, I'm gonna do it in a way that you probably have never heard before. I was going to say for the people who aren't as familiar, but even the people who are familiar, unless you've read my book, The God Who Riots, it's usually behind me on that little thing on the wall, but I'm holding in the copy. I got a copy of The God Who Riots, Taking Back the Radical Jesus by me, put out in 2022, and a Bible next to me. Oh my goodness. We're getting real spiritual today. But I was going to say Palm Sunday, and I'll explain more about Palm Sunday in a bit, but then it's Holy Week, and then it's Good Friday, talking about when Jesus died on the cross. Then it's Easter Sunday, and then we'll move on. But today's episode, I want to talk about the story that starts off Holy Week and a little bit of what happens during that week leading up to Jesus's arrest. And then next Friday will probably be even more Jesus-y. I'm going to talk about like a different perspective of the crucifixion and really the political context of it. And we're really going to get deep on the political context today too, but that's going to be a very different type of thing. And then I needed to do a bonus episode for the Patreon this month, and I thought, let's just do an Easter bonus episode. So I'm going to do another one next Sunday as well, about a different perspective of Easter, the resurrection, all that fun stuff. And so that'll just be for the Patreon. If you want to support this podcast, check out patreon.com/Damon Garcia. Also, you can support simply just by subscribing to the podcast and commenting and sharing and leaving a review, all that fun stuff. But I appreciate you all just for being here. And even if you've read this book, The God Who Riots, I'm trying to promote this here. I'm going to get to some stuff that you may not have read in this book either. We're going to go a little bit deeper. But this book, The God Who Riots, the title is literally in reference to Jesus in the temple a couple days before he's arrested and killed, in the temple, flipping tables, pouring out the coins of the money changers, and being protected by the crowds so that he doesn't get arrested. It's literally a riot. And so that's what the title is in reference to, The God Who Riots. And it's also in reference to like modern day riots, specifically when I was starting to work on the book, seeing the riots during the Black Lives Matter protests in Minneapolis after the killing of George Floyd, the police killing of George Floyd. And at the time, a lot of people were wondering, how long is this coronavirus gonna last? And seeing all the deaths that were being caused by that, and a lot of people asking, where is God in all this? And then seeing the live stream of like the burning police station in Minneapolis on the third day of protests, it was like, oh yeah, I think this is where God is. Among the oppressed, the vulnerable, the marginalized, fighting for a different world. And so those two big things inspired the title of this book. But then throughout the whole book, I'm just talking about the ways that people use their faith to empower them to fight for justice, even though we're very used to people using their faith to just justify continuing injustice. And so I'm gonna get deeper. I'm trying to like in my head think like, what part do I mention now? What part do I mention later? So we're gonna get a little bit deeper, but let me just say, if you like what I have to say about this kind of stuff, go buy that book if you're into it and if you haven't already, or go tell your library to get it. That's always a good thing too. It's always cool to hear people say that they requested for their library to get it, which you can all do pretty easily. I think you just need a library card, and then just request the book, and then they'll put it in the library, in your local library. And I remember seeing somebody say they found the book in the library too, which is also cool. But anyway, let's just get into this, people. Palm Sunday. Also got a little outline by the side here, and then we'll look at these stories and parts of the book, and we're gonna get through this. There's a lot that I have in my head right now, because there's a lot I can say about this stuff, but I want to keep it focused. We're quite a few minutes into this podcast, and I still feel like we haven't started, but it's okay. It's a podcast. That's what the first episode was titled. It's a podcast, and it's episode 14, and it's still a podcast, and I appreciate the grace from y'all, people. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I got a reply on Twitter from an old church leader from back in my evangelical days, and it was in response to a tweet I'd posted that said, Jesus was a brown body executed by the state for the crime of sedition, put on a stake on a hill for everybody to see what happens to those who stand up to the rule of Caesar. And then I added at the end of that spicy post, don't tell me Jesus wasn't political. You know, some typical spicy Christian leftist stuff, you know? And I had that pinned on my Twitter for a long time, but I felt like that was just me trying to like open up this conversation of like this. When you start to look at the political context of what was happening around Jesus's execution, things start to open up in really interesting ways. And so I had an old church leader reply to that and say, was Jesus political, or was it the people who killed him that were being political? Which is so strange. And then he commented something like that on a YouTube video too. And it was strange to read that because, first of all, I hadn't talked to him in years. And here he is trying to argue for some reason. And I didn't even know where to start this conversation, because I had made this shift many years prior to start to see the political context in the Bible. And it changed everything. Like, first of all, politics, I mean, it's just like polis, what was that, Greek or Latin? Yeah, Greek, to just refer to like citizens. It's like, it's just how you organize society. But specifically, the way that power is used to organize society. And to look at this story of a man who is born and lives in a powerless position during the Roman Empire and then is killed by the Roman Empire through a type of execution that was, I know, and this is where we start to get beyond the Bible and read the historical context around the Bible. We learn that being put on a cross was specifically a political punishment. It was a type of torture and execution that the Roman Empire developed, or I mean, they adopted it from other cultures and developed it and perfected it to be especially violent. And it was only used for the crime of sedition, of challenging the government, or perhaps leading a movement against the Roman government. And so when someone's put on a cross and tortured for a very long time on the cross, bleeding out for everyone to see on a hill, and then leaving their body there while wild dogs surround their body, waiting to, I mean, sorry, this is getting so graphic, but to eat the body, literally, like that's what happened, and to do it in public on a hill for everyone to see. It was strictly for the purpose of showing everyone this is what happens if you stand up to the rule of Caesar. This wasn't, and even like the two guys beside him that get called thieves usually. The word, I believe, was lestai, which could be translated to thieves. It is probably better translated to bandits, or like other people who are challenging the Roman Empire. And so just that alone, like, take away everything we know from the Bible about Jesus, just the fact that you would put this Jesus on a Roman cross, and that seems to be something that a lot of historians agree on, like non-religious historians agree on, that there was this guy who led some sort of Jewish movement. He was put on a cross, and his followers continued the thing after. That's like what all historians can agree on. But just that detail alone already tells you a lot about who this Jesus was, what his teachings were actually implying, how people were interpreting his teachings, and specifically how the Roman Empire interpreted the teachings. And so just that alone starts to open up the story in so many interesting ways. And I get this reply from this old church leader. Was Jesus political, or was it the people who killed him being political? Which is such a weird binary, especially because Jesus talked about the kingdom of God, ushering in the kingdom of God, which was deliberate language and was seen as a threat because it implies the ushering out of the kingdom of Caesar. And he said things like, the kingdom of God is within you. It's among you. It's like a mustard seed that's planted and grows. Like, he was talking about, this is something that's happening here and right now, not some heavenly afterlife kingdom. This is something right here, right now, which has political implications. So I was really bothered because it's like, yeah, like I said, I haven't talked to you in years. And how do you not get this? Like, you've been alive longer than I have. You've been studying this stuff longer than I have. Like, I don't get it. And I was so frustrated with a lot of my old ministry peers and just felt like, how could these people not get it? How are these people not, like, looking for the truth? That's what it felt like. And so that brings me to the first time I got high on marijuana. And for all of us who have smoked weed, the first time you smoke weed and the first time you actually get high on it is usually two separate events. And so, I mean, I've never been really that much of a weed guy, but I've always had friends that were very much weed guys. And so I tried it a few times, but it didn't really do anything for me. And then I was at my friend's birthday party, and it was like, we need to figure this out. I need to know how to actually do this. And so I think the other times I just wasn't smoking it right. But really, my friends weren't explaining it right, you know? I don't know how to do this whole like inhale and hold it and do it in a very particular way. I don't know. And so anyway, one day at my friend's birthday party, one of my other friends was walking around with his bong, and he was like, all right, we need to get you high for the first time. I'm going to walk you through this. This is like my 21-year-old friend with Lyme's disease and a medical marijuana card telling me my weed is extra strong, bro. Because I have a card, so I could get stronger weed, you know? That taxed weed, that big pharma weed. And so he tells me, take a deep breath first. Inhale. And then hold the whole deal. Or take a deep breath and then smoke it, and then inhale and then hold. And then I got high. You know, the whole thing. And it was weird because I couldn't really focus on anything at first. And it was hard to hold conversations with people. And people were like also high, but also kept trying to have like these deep conversations with me, and all complex and long-winded. And I was just like, why are you doing this? Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? And like one friend was like, if Twitter is going to decide to censor people, then they need to decide if they're a platform or a publisher. And I'm just like, I've already forgot the beginning of your sentence. I can't do this. Which is still why I'm not that much of a weed guy. I don't like being in that state of mind. But eventually I chilled out, and then I found a quiet place to chill. But I still couldn't get this comment out of my head, because I received that comment that morning of that old church leader saying like, was Jesus really political, or was it the people who killed him being political? And I realized like, I think the reason it bothered me was because he clearly wasn't trying to have a conversation about it. He was just trying to cast doubt. He was asking questions like the serpent in Genesis asked questions. He's like, did God really tell you not to eat from that tree? Was Jesus really political? Like, it was just to challenge me and cast doubt, and not interested in an actual conversation at all. And I think that's why it really bothered me. Like, you're just here to mess with me. Like, I'm not I'm not interested in that. But then as I was in this space where I was like high and able to step outside myself a bit and think more about it. And I realized like, nah, I can't unsee what I've seen. And it's a shame that some people refuse to see. And I think a lot of us have moments like this where our anger turns to grief, or rather our anger is revealed as grief all along. And that's what happened to me in this elevated high moment. It went from being frustrated with people like that who seem to refuse to see this bigger picture of Jesus, and it turned to pity. And I was like, damn, that's sad that these other people don't get to see this bigger picture. I feel bad for them. They're missing out. And so I tell that story to say, like, this type of stuff I talk about, like in this book, The God Who Writes, Taking Back the Radical Jesus is this bigger picture of Jesus that so many of my old Christian friends will never know. And yet they spend so much of their time talking about Jesus. And it's sad. And I want y'all to know, who are listening to this, like, yeah, that sucks, but they're missing out. And we're discovering a bigger picture of Jesus that actually is makes the whole thing so much more interesting. But what's funny is some people would think the bigger picture of Jesus would be like talking about Jesus as God. But the type of bigger picture I'm talking about is talking about Jesus the human and getting more human. And it's the human story that often gets missed. And when we bring back the human element to these stories in the Bible and the way we talk about Jesus, a lot of interesting details start to emerge that you just skim over before. I really like this story I heard from somebody who said he was in seminary learning about the Bible, and he had a professor that was able to really talk about the human side of Jesus. And he was talking about the story during his 40 days in the wilderness where he's being tempted, which is also why Lent is 40 days. It's based off that 40-day period before Jesus' ministry. And he's being tempted by Satan. That's how the story describes it. And in the story, Satan is showing him these different temptations of just follow this. I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world, the riches of the world, to stray away from the path he was on. And also that story I think can be interpreted symbolically as well. I'm not so sure there was a literal evil spiritual figure showing him this, but that's for another episode. But what was funny is when he was describing the story, there's this part where Satan tells him, jump off this mountain, jump off this cliff and be caught by the angels if you you really are who you say you are. And Jesus says, no, I won't let you test me. You can't put God to the test. But what's funny is the way he just described this teacher was teaching this story. He was saying, now, does anyone know why Jesus didn't jump off that cliff? And people were thinking about Jesus's philosophy and teaching and his perspective and what would happen if he didn't jump off. And the teacher said, because Jesus knew if he jumped off that cliff, he would have died. And it was just this moment of oh yeah, Jesus would have died. Jesus was able to die. Jesus was killed after all. Jesus knew if he would have jumped off that cliff, he would have died. And throughout the story, as he's teaching people and healing people, there will be these times right after he heals someone, he says, don't tell anyone about what just happened. And I would hear these sermons about theorizing, what did Jesus mean? Why didn't he want to tell people? Was it a message about humility, or the ways that healing can actually stay with people and blah, blah, blah. But then you start to realize through the lens of this larger political context, Jesus was trying to avoid being arrested during the entirety of his 3-year ministry. That's why he's saying, don't tell anyone about this. Because in the first century, there are many movements where people claim to be the Messiah and gathered followers. And they either claimed, I'm going to be the one to lead this movement of followers to eliminate the Roman Empire, or we're going to come together and wait for God or another Messiah to come down and help us defeat the Roman Empire. And they're all waiting on the kingdom of God to replace the kingdom of Caesar. And so each of those people who claimed to be the Messiah, at least the ones who were able to gather followers, were also put on crosses, executed for the crime of sedition. Jesus wasn't the first one. And Jesus wasn't even the last one either to make that claim and to be executed on a cross for that. And so Jesus knew the whole time, this is very risky. At any point, if this starts to spread and we're going city to city teaching this and healing people, this whole thing could end sooner than I want it to. Because the whole time they're headed toward Jerusalem. And when he gets to Jerusalem, he does some political demonstrations. And so we're going to talk about that. Let's see. Now we get to the Bible, okay? No more skimming. No more paraphrasing. We're going to straight up read this thing. Mark 11. Because this is where we get Palm Sunday and all that. Because Palm Sunday, celebrated the Sunday before Easter, celebrates this part of the story where Jesus enters into Jerusalem on a donkey and people are waving palm branches. That's where we get Palm Sunday. Anyway, he goes for a Jewish holy week, Passover week, which was celebrating the exodus of the Jews from slavery in Egypt. And so that is why he's in Jerusalem. And here's how it starts. Mark 11, 1. When they were approaching Jerusalem, at Bethpage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden," which is like a donkey. "Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it, and will send it back here immediately.'" They went away and found a colt tied near a door outside in the street. As they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, "What are you doing untying the colt?" They told them that what Jesus had said, and they allowed them to take it. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." Then he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. Okay. So the way that this part of the story is usually preached, and the ways that I heard it preached growing up, is to really paint Jesus as this very, otherworldly, magical, basically, figure who is so supernatural that he's fulfilling prophecies left and right. And also it's showing his miraculous powers, like the donkey. He just has this special omniscience that a donkey will be tied over there and tied over there in Jerusalem. Go to it and there will be a donkey there and you'll find it and you bring it to me. And then riding the donkey, they're saying he's fulfilling the prophecy told by Zechariah, which Matthew's version directly quotes Zechariah 9:9, which says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." And people will preach see? Jesus was the Messiah. Look at him fulfilling prophecies that were foretold so long before him. And look how supernatural he is. Therefore, follow him. I heard that teaching so much growing up. Let me prove to you how supernatural this is, so that you basically are cornered into feeling like you gotta follow it. Which I don't think any of the early Christians were doing. It was a totally different thing. I think that's a very modern day way of evangelizing. That's probably more inspired by materialism, the Enlightenment, rationality, scientific thinking of if I could prove to you this thing, then you have to believe it. I feel like that way of thinking ended up eventually inspiring the ways that people tried to convince others of Christianity. And then it had to be supernatural. And then the flip side of that is if anybody, any historian or scholar is able to prove that certain parts of the Bible weren't literally true, or maybe weren't like supernaturally possible, then the whole thing is fake. I think both those is based on a weird reading of the Bible that wasn't meant to be. And so let's get human, people. First off, like I said, this whole thing is headed toward Jerusalem during Jesus' entire ministry. It's spreading city to city, community to community. Word of Jesus would have already gotten to Jerusalem by now, especially when you have many Jews coming from several surrounding cities and even other regions and going to Jerusalem for Passover week. People would have already been expecting Jesus. And Jesus has already been planning this, so people would have already been aware of the plan. Now, this is where we get kind of like reading between the lines here to begin to see what's actually going on. And these are details I don't even think the biblical writers felt they needed to put in. Like they had other purposes. But just imagine with me for a second. They already know he's coming. It's planned. And his community is helping him plan it and prepare it for him. And so some of his followers in Jerusalem tie the donkey there. And Jesus knows this is part of the plan. Go get the donkey that's already there for me. And if anyone who isn't part of the plan is like, wait, what? What are you doing taking that donkey? Be like, oh, this is for the Lord. The Lord needs it. Or this is for Jesus. Be like, oh, okay, cool. This is part of the plan. Okay, got it. Boom. Then he gets on the donkey, and they already have the palm branches ready, and they prepare him to go in, which is like, think about this. He doesn't need to be on a donkey. This is a performance. This is a planned demonstration. They're already walking together, but he stops at the entrance and says, okay, I need you to go get the donkey so I can sit on it. And everybody puts their coat on it, and then they go in. And so think about this now. These are all good Jews who know their Bible, who know Zechariah, who really know all the prophets. This again is a planned demonstration based on this passage in Zechariah. And yet this is preached as if Jesus is accidentally fulfilling prophecies. What about this other perspective that, no, they're fully aware of these prophecies, and in order to send a message, they are reenacting these prophecies. Knowing that this is in Zechariah, they all plan for this demonstration on the first week of Passover. You're going to enter in on a donkey, palm branches, to bring this verse from Zechariah to mind, which would also bring the next verse to mind, which isn't quoted by Matthew, but they would have all had it in their head. Zechariah in Zechariah 9:10, he will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. And yet so many people read this as so over spiritualized. But if you read if you read it from the perspective we're talking about, this is extremely political. Think when you read it from the perspective of the Roman Empire and Caesar, who wants to remain in power, and you see that these people are talking about how actually their God is going to cut off the chariots and war horses and peace, a different kind of peace under a different ruler will be declared among the nations, a different dominion from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. That is talking about the overthrow. It's the implied overthrow of the Roman Empire. That is a political threat. Here's another detail that isn't mentioned in the Bible, but would have been known to everyone. We know from the first century historian Josephus. He wrote that during every Passover, Pontius Pilate and a legion of Roman soldiers spent the week in Jerusalem because of an increased chance of an uprising as Jews celebrated the event of the Exodus, which was its own uprising. And so the Romans wanted to make sure that nobody gets any dangerous ideas as they recounted God's attack on Egypt and the liberation of the Israelites. And so I'm like reading directly from the book now, but so think about this. We know it literally tells us where Jesus entered from when he was at Bethpage and Bethany near the Mount of Olives. So we know which side he's entering Jerusalem. He's entering from the eastern side. And we also know from history, because also, the Romans were extremely good at documenting their history because they thought they were going to rule the world forever. And they were extremely powerful at the time, which made it easier to document. And which is also why we're able to get this whole other different picture of Jesus by reading history, seeing the context he was living in. And so think about this. As Jesus humbly entered Jerusalem from the east on a donkey, surrounded by a crowd of peasants and leafy branches, Pontius Pilate was likely entering Jerusalem from the west at the same time on a chariot led by a war horse, surrounded by a legion of Roman soldiers with armor and deadly weaponry. I think this is a planned demonstration to send a political message. People, come on now. So this demonstration exposed two warring kingdoms, the kingdom of Rome with the power and the weapons on their side, and the kingdom of God with the people on their side, desperate for liberation. And then Bethany, and then it says they went back. Where is it? Where'd it go? Oh, yeah. Then he entered Jerusalem, went into the temple. When he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12, which is, in the beginning, it mentioned Bethany and the Mount of Olives. So, it says, as it was already late, it adds that detail. Because if they were caught at night in the main city in Jerusalem, then they could have easily been arrested by the Roman soldiers, who were they're extra Roman soldiers looking for an uprising, especially at the temple. And so at night they had to make sure, or before it became dark, they had to make sure to go back to where they're staying strategically in Bethany, not in Jerusalem. And they have to pass through the Mount of Olives to get to Bethany, and then pass through the Mount of Olives again the next morning to get back to Jerusalem, which is also an attempt at hiding their path. So think about this. They do this planned political demonstration. Jesus, then, before it gets dark, go through the hidden path through the Mount of Olives back to where we're staying in Bethany. Next morning, come back. And let's see. Next morning, come back and do another demonstration. Came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling and those who were buying in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He was teaching and saying, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." And when the chief priests and the scribes heard it, they kept looking for a way to kill him, for they were afraid of him, because the whole crowd was spellbound by his teaching. And when evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. Again, planned demonstration. Crowds are surrounding him, protecting him. Other passages give more details too, of the crowds protecting him, so he doesn't get arrested. And then before it gets dark, sneak out and sneak through the Mount of Olives back to Bethany. I'm repeating this detail because it's important. You'll see why if you don't get it already. Some of you might get it already, which is cool for you. But I just think this is really interesting. And then the reason I'm like, some of you may think like, why is he going so slow through these random details? It's because I grew up hearing this story so many times. And then when I started to see it as a human story and as a political story and started to see the historical context around it, the whole story just started to shine in a whole different way that made it so much more exciting than the overly spiritualized version of it. And this next detail is something that really inspired this book that I wrote. And it's understanding what Jesus means when he said that you've turned this place into a den of robbers. And he says, like, he was teaching and saying, is it not written? He's quoting something. He's quoting a previous prophet. He's quoting Jeremiah. And when we look at the details from Jeremiah, it starts to feel different as well. So let's look at Jeremiah. Because, this is a planned demonstration. Again, in the same way that they're reenacting the prophecy of Zechariah, he's also reenacting an action of Jeremiah, who also did a planned demonstration protest in the temple hundreds of years beforehand. People don't talk about this. People don't talk about Jeremiah doing the same thing in the temple. Jeremiah, let's see. Spoke at the gate of the temple. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, amend your ways and your doings, and let me dwell with you in this place. Do not trust in these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. So he's like, it's like 600 years before. And it's like he's already prepared for people to be like, hey, what are you doing? This isn't the place. This is the temple of the Lord. It's like, hey, come on. No, this is exactly the place. And because he's trying to get their attention. And so then he says, speaking on behalf of God, he says, for if you truly amend your ways and your doings, if you truly act justly with one with another, if you do not oppress the alien, the orphan, and the widow, or shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not go after other gods to your own hurt, then I will dwell with you in this place, in the land that I gave of old to your ancestors forever and ever. Here you are, trusting in deceptive words to no avail. Will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, make offerings to Baal, and go after other gods that you have not known, and then come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, and say, we are safe, only to go on doing all these abominations? Has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers in your sight? You know I too am watching, says the Lord. So hold on. The way that this story was taught to me growing up was that when Jesus says you've turned this place to a den of robbers, after he flipped tables and poured out coins and stuff, it was taught that like Jesus was upset about the buying and selling going on in the temple. And he's like saying, like, you guys are basically committing robbery. You guys are being robbers by doing the buying and selling of animals in the temple. But here's the thing. That was, at the time, a normal part of the temple that had been going on a long time. And if Jesus had a problem with anything to do with the sacrificial system, I think Jesus would have done his protest deeper in the temple, not in the outer gates where everybody is. It seemed like he was flipping tables to try to put a temporary hold on the activities of the temple. And when he says, you turn this place to a den of robbers, if we look at the context of who he's quoting, Jeremiah, we see that a den of robbers doesn't mean a place where people are robbed. A den of robbers is where robbers go and hide, saying, we are safe. That's what he says. Like, you're going to go hide here in this den of robbers? and say and think you're safe. Meanwhile, you're oppressing the foreigner and the orphan and the widow and shedding innocent blood. So a den of robbers is this metaphor to say you're using the temple in this religious space to hide and avoid the injustices going on in the world. Which is interesting, because I think that today a lot of Christians use their religion in the same way, using their religion and religious spaces to hide and avoid the injustices going on in the world. So when we see our own religion used to oppress others in the name of God and hiding from the injustices going on in the world, and we call that out, we're living like Jesus. And that's the whole book, basically. I mean, with the stuff I've been explaining is just in the last 2 chapters. All the chapters before that is talking about how that spirit of faith, of challenging your own faith in the ways that it's used to oppress others and reclaiming a more radical, liberating version of it. I talk about how that's happened throughout history and ways that you can do that. And so in ways that we can do it even more so today. All leading up to the end here with Jesus in the temple and then being arrested and executed. So then, all right, so let's see here. So again, I'm saying all these details to show you how this is a planned political demonstration. Jesus flipping tables in the temple isn't a random temper tantrum. It's a planned demonstration, reenacting an action of Jeremiah that everyone there would have been very familiar with, and directly quoting Jeremiah, which everyone would have been very familiar with, to send a political message about the kingdom of God against the kingdom of Caesar, and the ways that religious leaders had compromised with the kingdom of Caesar. And so, Jesus, this human figure, has a very powerful message. And it starts to make sense why they wanted to arrest him and execute him. And it starts to make sense why people were so scared after he's arrested and started to run away. And so I give this detail about going back and forth, staying in Bethany, and then in the morning going through the Mount of Olives to Jerusalem, and then before it gets dark, going out through the Mount of Olives back to Bethany. This is the path they're going throughout Passover week until this path is eventually discovered by the Roman soldiers. Now, the way that the story is told in the gospel is that Judas brings the Roman soldiers, tells on them and brings them to this path. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's a different conversation of like how much of this is accurate to history and how much of it isn't. I mean, you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and there's several contradicting details. I think it's because they're not trying to give a historical retelling. The gospel writers are evangelists, not historians. They're trying to give a shortened version of events to send a particular message about the kind of person that Jesus was. And so, but we don't even need that. Like you could just tell, like eventually this path is going to be figured out, whether Judas brought it to them or they figured it out on their own. But this is why Jesus is in the Mount of Olives when he gets arrested. And another thing, the way this story is taught, it seems like Jesus just happened to be hanging out in one of his favorite chill spots. No, they were going through there to stay hidden, to avoid getting arrested. That detail alone, Jesus avoiding getting arrested throughout his ministry, and especially during that week, is a detail that was like never taught to me And it's wild. It's like, and the reason I feel like it's important is because it again reveals the weight of the political aspect of his message. He knew it would get him in trouble. And so they're in the Mount of Olives one night. He's with a few of his disciples, and he goes to pray, and he tells them, keep watch, and they fall asleep. And now think about this. Jesus has this group of disciples and a larger group of followers who are ready in Jerusalem for when he's doing these planned demonstrations and teaching, that they surround him to make sure that he isn't arrested because the crowds are too big. And so there's the religious leaders and the soldiers have to avoid trying to get him in the temple when he's surrounded by all these people, because they don't want to cause a big uprising and they don't want to cause a bunch of violence. So the crowds make sure to protect him, knowing that. And then at night, he has his close followers who he's staying with in Bethany protecting him as well and keeping watch. And it is in this moment where they fail to keep watch because they fell asleep that Jesus is finally caught and arrested by the Roman soldiers. After all this time. And it makes me wonder, like, were there other demonstrations planned? I mean, they're going back and forth all week long. But he knew it was coming. And that's why he tells them multiple times in the Gospels that like I'm going to be killed. And again, sometimes preachers will teach that as a way of being like, whoa, Jesus predicts the future. He's so supernatural. But again, if you look at it from this human perspective, it's like, obviously he's going to be killed. He knows that the whole time, and so do his followers. That's what he's talking about. Martin Luther King Jr. told people he knew he was going to be killed. Malcolm X said he knew he was going to be killed. Fred Hampton said he knew he was going to be killed. A lot of revolutionary leaders knew they were going to be killed, and that's what happened, because they know the consequences of what they're doing in a suppressive government. And so I just wanted to give you all this different perspective of the human Jesus as a bit of a political activist who's trying to send this bigger message to challenge the rule of Rome. And he's arrested. And his followers are terrified. And they run away, abandoning Jesus. And that's where we'll stop for now. And I'll see y'all next week for Good Friday, where we could continue. Leave y'all on a cliffhanger. We'll see what happens. Thank you for listening, and I'll see y'all next week. Happy Holy Week. Bye-bye.